The Urantia book, section 3, History of Urantia, paper 90, Shamanism, Medicine Men and Priests. The evolution of religious observance progressed from placation, avoidance, exorcism, coercion, conciliation and propitiation, to sacrifice, atonement and redemption. The technique of religious ritual passed from the forms of the primitive cult through fetishes to magic and miracles, and as a ritual became more complex in response to man's increasingly complex concept of the supermaterial realms. It was inevitably dominated by medicine men, shamans and priests. In the advancing concepts of primitive man, the spirit world was eventually regarded as being unresponsive to the ordinary mortal. Only the exceptional women would be heard by the spirits. Religion thus enters upon a new phase, a stage wherein it gradually becomes second-handed. Always thus a medicine man, a shaman or a priest intervene between the religionist and the object of worship. And today most Urantian systems of organized religious belief are passing through this level of evolutionary development. Evolutionary religion is born of a simple and all-powerful fear, the fear which surges through the human mind when confronted with the unknown, the inexplicable and the incomprehensible. Religion eventually achieves the profoundly simple realization on all-powerful love, and the love which so sweeps irresistibly through the human soul when awakened to the conception of the limitless affection of the universal Father for the sons of the universe. But in between the beginning and the consummation of religious evolution, there intervene the long ages of the shamans, who presume to stand between man and God as intermediaries, interpreters and intercessors. Alright, 1. The first shamans, the so-called medicine men. The shaman was the ranking medicine man, the ceremonial fetish man, and the focus personality for all the practices of evolutionary religion. In many groups, the shaman outranked the war chief, marking the beginning of the church domination of the state. The shaman sometimes functioned as a priest and even as a priest king. Some of the later tribes had both the earlier shaman medicine men, seers, and the later appearing shaman priests. So seers are, as a matter of fact, you can say, coming from the shaman medicine men. And the later appearing shaman priests, and in many cases the office of shaman became hereditary. Since in olden times anything abnormal was ascribed to spirit possession, any striking mental or physical abnormality constituted qualification for being a medicine man. Many of these men were epileptic. Many of these men were epileptic. Many of the women hysteric, and these two types accounted for a so-called good deal of ancient inspiration as well as spirit and devil possession. Quite a few of these earliest of priests were of a class which has since been denominated paranoiac. So many of the olden shamans unwittingly stumbled onto hypnotism. That's why you should be very careful with things such as hypnotism. Others induced auto-hypnosis by prolonged staring at their navels. Others induced while many resorted to these tricks tricks and deceptions. Their reputation as a class, after all, stood on apparent achievement. When a shaman failed in his undertakings, if he could not advance a plausible alibi, he was either demoted or killed. Thus the honest shamans early perished. Only the shrewd actors survived. It was shamanism that took the exclusive direction of tribal affairs out of the hands of the old and the strong and lodged it in the hands of the shrewd, the clever, and the far-sighted and the tricksters. 2 shamanistic practices. Spirit conjuring was a very precise and highly complicated procedure comparable to present-day church rituals, conducted in an ancient tongue. Hey, maybe here is the root of this so-called speaking in tongues. The human race very early sought for superhuman help, for revelation, and men believed that the shaman actually received such revelations. While the shamans utilized the great power of suggestion in their work, it was almost invariably negative suggestion. Only in a very recent time has the technique of positive suggestion been employed. In the early development of their profession, the shamans began to specialize in such vocations as rain-making, disease healing, and crime detecting. To heal diseases was not, however, the chief function of a shamanic medicine man. It was rather to know and to control the hazards of living. Ancient black art, both religious and secular, was called white art when practiced by either priests, seers, shamans, or medicine men. The practitioners of the black art were called sorcerers, magicians, wizards, witches, enchanters, necromancers, conjurers, covens, and soothsayers. As time passed, all such purported contact with the supernatural was classified either as witchcraft or shamancraft. Witchcraft embraced the magic performed by earlier irregular and unrecognized spirits. Shamancraft had to do with miracles performed by regular spirits and recognized gods of the tribe, the so-called gods. In later times, the witch became associated with the devil, and thus was the stage set for the many comparatively recent exhibitions of religious intolerance. Witchcraft was a religion with many primitive tribes. The shamans were great believers in the mission of chance as revelatory of the will of the spirits. They frequently cast lots to arrive at decisions. Modern survivals of this proclivity for casting lots are illustrated not only in the many games of chance, but also in the well-known counting out rhymes. Once the person counted out must die. Now he is only it in some childish game. That which was serious business to primitive man has survived as a diversion of the modern child. The medicine man put great trust in signs and omens, such as, when you hear the sound of a rustling in the tops of the mulberry trees, then shall you bestir yourself. Very early in the history of the race, the shamans turned their attention to the stars. Primitive astrology was a worldwide belief and practice. Dream interpreting also became widespread. All this was soon followed by the appearance of those temperamental shamanesses who professed to be able to communicate with the spirits of the dead. Though of ancient origin, the rainmakers or weather shamans have persisted right on down through the ages. A severe drought meant death to the early agriculturists. Weather control was the object of much ancient magic. Well, weather control is still going on unto the day of today. Civilized man still makes the weather the common topic of conversation. The olden peoples all believed in the power of the shaman as a rainmaker, but it was customary to kill him when he failed, unless he could offer a plausible excuse to account for the failure. Ever and anon true prophets and teachers arose to denounce and expose shamanism. Even the vanishing red man had such a prophet within the past 100 years. The Shawnee Tenskwatawa, who predicted the eclipse of the sun in 1806 and denounced the vices of the white man. Many true teachers have appeared among the various tribes and races all through the long ages of evolutionary history, and they will ever continue to appear to challenge the shamans or priests of any age who oppose general education and attempt to thwart scientific progress. The shamanic priests and medicine men often became very wealthy through the accretion of their various fees, which were ostensibly offerings to the spirits. Not infrequently, a shaman would accumulate practically all the material wealth of his tribe. Upon the death of a wealthy man, it was customary to divide his property equally with the shaman and some public enterprise or charity. So now we know where the root is laid of charity and the taxation of hereditary. This practice still obtains in some parts of Tibet, where one half the male population belongs to this class of non-producers. And then as last, the shaman dressed well and usually had a number of wives. They were the original aristocracy, being exempt from all tribal restrictions. They were very often of low-grade mind and morals. They suppressed their rivals by denominating them witches or sorcerers, and very frequently rose to such positions of influence and power that they were able to dominate chiefs or kings. Primitive men regarded the shaman as a so-called necessary evil. He feared him but did not love him. Early men respected knowledge. He honored and rewarded wisdom. The shaman was mostly fraught, but the veneration for shamanism well illustrates the premium put upon wisdom. In the evolution of the race. 3. Shamanic theory of disease and death. Since ancient man regarded himself and his material environment as being directly responsive to the whims of the ghosts and the fancies of the spirits, it is not strange that his religion should have been such and so exclusively concerned with material affairs. Modern man attacks his material problems directly. He recognizes that matter is responsive to the intelligent manipulation of mind. Primitive men likewise desire to modify and even to control the life and energies of the physical domain, and since his limited comprehension of the cosmos led him to the belief that ghosts, spirits and gods were personally and immediately concerned with the detailed control of life and matter. Well, we are still facing this. As a matter of fact, this is laid on the basis for the outrolling of total world control over all life forms on this planet. But because the majority of humanity lacks hunger and thirst to higher spiritual truths, they don't see this and they have no clue where the actual root is laid for the total state of world population dominion and control. He locally directed his efforts to winning the favor and support of these superhuman agencies. Viewed in this light, much of the inexplicable and irrational in the ancient cults is understandable. The ceremonies of the cult were primitive man's attempt to control the material world in which he found himself. And this is still going on because man is still trying to control the material world through all nasty forms of technology and so-called A and I. And many of his efforts were directed to the end of prolonging life and ensuring health, since all these diseases and death itself were originally regarded as spirit phenomena. It was inevitable that the shamans, while functioning as medicine men and priests, should also have labored as doctors and surgeons. The primitive mind may be handicapped by lack of facts, but it is for all that logical. When thoughtful men observed disease and death, they set about to determine the causes of these visitations, and in accordance with their understanding, the shamans and the scientists have propounded the following theories of affliction. 1. Ghosts - direct spirit influences. Well, the earliest hypothesis advanced in explanation of disease and death was that spirits caused disease by enticing the soul out of the body. If it failed to return, death ensured. 2. Violence - obvious causes. The causes for some accidents and deaths were so easy to identify that they were early removed from the category of ghost. Action. Fatalities and wounds attendant upon war, animal combat, and other readily identifiable agencies were considered as natural occurrences, but it was long believed that the spirits were still responsible for delayed healing or for the infection of wounds of even so-called natural causation. If no observable natural agent could be discovered, the spirit ghosts were still held responsible for disease and death. 3. Magic, the influence of enemies. Much sickness was thought to be caused by bewitchment, the action of the evil eye, and the magic pointing bow. At one time it was really dangerous to point finger to anyone. It is still regarded as ill-mannered to point. In cases of obscure disease and death, the ancients who hold a formal inquest dissect the body and settle upon some finding as the cause of death. And then as last, otherwise the death would be laid to witchcraft, thus necessitating the execution of the witch responsible therefor. So the ancient coroners, these ancient coroners inquests saved many a supposed witch life. Among some it was believed that a tribesman could die as a result of his own witchcraft, in which event no one was accused. And then 4, sin, punishment for taboo and violation. In comparatively recent times, it has been believed that sickness is a punishment for sin, personal or racial. Among peoples traversing this level of evolution, the prevailing theory is that one cannot be afflicted unless one has violated a taboo. Mesopotamians long regarded disease as the result of the action of evil demons, although the Chaldeans also looked upon the stars as the cause of suffering. 5. Natural causation. Mankind has been very slow to learn the material secrets of the interrelationship of cause and effect in the physical domains of energy, matter, and life. The ancient Greeks, having preserved the traditions of Adamson's teachings, were among the first to recognize that all disease is the result of natural causes. Slowly and certainly, the unfolding of a scientific era is destroying man's age-old theories of sickness and death. Fever was one of the first human ailments to be removed from the category of supernatural disorders. And progressively the era of science also has broken the fetters of ignorance, which so long imprisoned the human mind. An understanding of old age and contagion is gradually obliterating man's fear of ghosts, spirits, and gods as the personal perpetrators of human misery and mortal suffering. Evolution unerringly achieves its end. It imbues men with that superstitious fear of the unknown and dread of the unseen, which is the scaffolding for the God concept. And having witnessed the birth and advanced comprehension of deity through the coordinate action of revelation, this same technique of evolution then unerringly sets in motion those forces of thought which will inexorably obliterate the scaffolding which has served its purpose. 4. Medicine under the shamans. The entire life of ancient men was prophylactic. Their religion was in no small measure a technique for disease prevention, and regardless of the error in their theories, they were wholehearted in putting them into effect. They had unbounded faith in their methods of treatment, and that in itself is a powerful remedy. Faith is required to get well. Under the foolish ministrations of one of these ancient shamans was, after all, not materially different from that which is required to experience healing at the hands of some of his later day successors who engaged in the non-scientific treatment of disease. Now again, disease was treated by chanting, holding, laying on of hands, breathing on the patient, and many other techniques which are still being done. In later times, the resort to temple sleep, during which healing supposedly took place, became widespread. The medicine men eventually essayed actual surgery in connection with temple slumber. Among the first operations was that of trevining the skull to allow a headache spirit to escape. The shamans learned to treat fracture and dislocations, to open boils and abscesses. The shamanesses became adept at midwifery. For long it was believed that the spirit causing the sickness could be soon blossomed as primitive health resorts. Now we know where the health resorts are coming from, this whole health resort idea. So did humankind change after at least 20-30,000 of years? No, not really. Early man discovered that heat would relieve pain. He used sunlight, fresh animal organs, hard clay and hard stones. Hard stones are still there. Hard clay is also still there, still being used. And many of these methods are still employed. Rhythm was practiced in an effort to influence the spirits. The toms were universal. Among some people, disease was thought to be caused by a wicked conspiracy between spirits and animals. This gave rise to the belief that there existed a beneficent plant remedy for every animal-caused disease. The red men were especially devoted to the plant theory of universal remedies. They always put a drop of blood in the root hole left when the plant was pulled up. Human secretions, being definitely magical, were highly regarded. Blood and urine were thus among the earliest medicines. This bills still being used by people, and were soon augmented by roots and various salts. The shamans believed that disease spirits could be driven out of the body by foul smelling and bad tasting medicines. Purging very early became a routine treatment, and values of raw cocoa and quinine were among the earliest pharmaceutical discoveries. The Greeks were the first to evolve truly rational methods of treating the sick. Both the Greeks and the Egyptians received their medicinal and medical knowledge from the Euphrates Valley. Oil and wine was a very early medicine for treating wounds. Castor oil and opium were used by the Sumerians. Many of these ancient and effective secret remedies lost their power when they became known. Secrecy has always been essential to the successful practice of fraud and superstition. Only facts and truth court the full light of comprehension and rejoice in the illumination and enlightenment of scientific research. And then the last point 5, priests and rituals. The priests evolved from shamans up through oracles, diviners, singers, dancers, weather makers, guardians of religious relics, temple custodians, and foretellers of events, to the status of actual directors of religious worship. Eventually, the office became hereditary and continuous priestly caste arose. As religion evolved, priests began to specialize according to their innate talents or special predilections. Some became singers, others prayers. So others became prayers, and still others sacrificers. Later came the orators - preachers. And when religion became institutionalized, these priests claimed to, between quotation marks, hold the keys of heaven. And in quotation marks. The priests have always sought to impress and awe the common people by conducting the religious ritual in an ancient tongue. Now again, do I say to you, question this whole idea of speaking in tongues? I truly believe that this is absolutely not something that Jesus, well, better said, that happened after the bestowing of the Spirit of truth that has been poured out over all flesh. This whole idea of speaking in tongues, we should really question this. Where does it come from and why is it being done? Why is it that so many so-called preachers, evangelists and so on are still pressing this forward and finding this so important? The priests have always sought to impress and awe the common people by conducting the religious ritual in an ancient tongue and by sundry magical passes, so to mystify the worshippers as to announce their own piety and authority. The great danger in all this is that the ritual tends to become a substitute for religion. The priesthoods have done much to delay scientific development and to hinder spiritual progress, but they have contributed to the stabilization of civilization and to the announcement of certain kinds of culture. But many modern priests have ceased to function as directors of the ritual worship of God, having turned their attention to theology - the attempt to divine God. It is not denied that the priests have been a millstone about the neck of the races, but the true religious leaders have been invaluable in pointing the way to higher and better realities. And with this said, I have come to the end of reading paper 90, presented by A. Melchizedek of Nebadon. And thank you so much, Melchizedek of Nebadon, for giving us this information. And thank you to all of you who have listened to this audio video. I wish you all a beautiful day and God bless you.